Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Pardo. Thank you, Ace. Good evening, everyone. My name is Henry Bott. I am the president of Swire Properties. And before we start with our presentation, I'd just like to quickly introduce my team and some of the experts that we have here with us tonight. So, on the Swire side, in the room, we have our Senior Vice President of Development, Kevin Davenport, our Vice President of Construction, Jessica Chen, Director of Development, Nicholas Esper, and Director of Corporate Affairs, Andres Avia. And then we have with us also our experts in demolition. So Ivy Fraden, who is the managing member and owner of BG Group, and Mark Loiseau, president and owner of CDI. And you'll be hearing from them a little bit later. We also have Mark Cummings, who is the general superintendent of Moss Construction. Moss are going to be the general contractor of the main project and are also helping to oversee and coordinate the demolition along with CDI and BG. And we have Alice Bravo, who is a civil engineer and former director of the Florida Department of Transport, who has been supporting Swire with advice on construction logistics, particularly concerning the bridge. So it's a very talented team we have on the Swire side. We also have joining us from the Brickell Key side, General Manager of the Brickell Key Master Association, Anna Browdingham, and then a load of folks from the city that I won't go through, but as Ace said, will be available to answer any questions later on. So our presentation here normally runs for about 20 minutes, after which we can address the questions that have been sent in advance. And then after that, we can open it up to more live questions, I believe. Alice, if you wouldn't mind just going on mute there. Thank you. So before we start, before we dive in, I'd just like to reiterate that I and Swire Properties are deeply committed to doing everything in our power to minimize disruption to the community whilst prioritizing safety for our staff, for our workers, and of course for the residents of Brickell Key. This presentation is now the 12th community presentation on the topic of demolition that we have done this year. And whilst we're not blind or ignorant to the fact that there will be some inconvenience caused, we hope that this shows you how serious we are about keeping everyone updated and engaged. So let's dive in. Most of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with the project, but just very quickly for those who aren't, the new development, which will be the residences at Mandarin Oriental, Miami, will be comprised of two towers. The taller south tower will be pure residences, so 228 large format residences. These are very large units, averaging about 3,000 square feet a unit. And then the north tower to the left-hand side there, that will house the new Mandarin Oriental Hotel, which will be 121 rooms. And then along with some hotel residences, which are fully furnished units, and some more private residences similar to the South Tower, just slightly smaller. I think important to note straight off the bat that the size of the hotel is about a third of the size of the existing hotel that is going to be demolished. And that's important because I think everyone's concerned, understandably, about the additional traffic, the activity that's going to be created from this new project. But as I'm sure people are familiar with, the activity and traffic generated from hotel is typically double the amount of residential. But with our new project, we're reducing the size of the hotel by 2/3 in favor of larger residential units. So the point being is that actually, in terms of the traffic created, overall, there should be no net increase, and we have had advice from traffic consultants to support that. You can see here a bird's eye view. This really just shows that a unique feature of the project is the connection of these two towers via a very expansive podium. And in that podium will be where all of the amenities of the project are housed. So the spa, the gym, all of the swimming pools. And it's our intention that there are various tiers of memberships created so that not just the hotel guests and the residents of the project will benefit, but also potentially residents on the island so that everyone can enjoy the facilities and benefits of the new project. And as you can see around the perimeter of the project, finally we will have a bay walk that is a full perimeter loop around the island. And that's Swire Properties that will be enhancing and re-providing that bay walk around this section of the island. So now moving on to the team, specifically the team that is supporting us on the demolition. And it's a very deep bench of talent. So as I mentioned, BG Group and CDI will be the experts specifically responsible for managing the demolition. And I think this is probably a good time to bring in Ivy Fraden of BG Group and Mark Loiseau of CDI if he's on. Mark, are you there?
Okay. Talk about demolition.
No, just present yourself.
Hi,
So
can you?
Mark, if you could just briefly introduce yourself and CDI, and then I'll
Right.
pass on to Ivy.
So Controlled Demolition has been taking down structures for almost 70 years across the United States and internationally. We've been working here in Miami, taking down structures since the 1960s. Most recently, the project we performed in felling the balance of the condominium at Champlain that tragically partially collapsed. So we're very familiar with the environment and local contractors and regulations, very comfortable working in the area.
Thank you, Mark and Ivy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ivy Fraden. I'm the managing member of the BG Group Demolition. We are a 23-year-old certified general contractor in the state of Florida that solely focuses on demolition. We, in the course of our demolition over that time, have done 8 implosions. All of the recent ones have been with CDI and Mark's company. You've seen us on site over the past several months working on interior cleaning, which we'll talk about later. Safety is our #1 priority, and we look forward to having as efficient and quick a process as we can safely provide. And that's our objective in getting the structure down.
Thank you, Ivy. So in addition to BG and CDI, we are also supported by Pepper Engineering Group, who specialize in forensic investigation and the simulation modeling involved with analyzing demolition methods and what is the most appropriate method. Thornton Tomasetti are also supporting. They're a structural engineer based out of New York, and they provide additional oversight and peer review to the team. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Moss, who aren't directly involved in demolition, but will be responsible for the construction of the main project and for continuity and smooth coordination, will also be working with the team for the demo. So it gives me a lot of comfort that this demolition will be managed to the highest level of professionalism by firms that are real specialists in their field and have exemplary track records in this type of demolition. Moving on to the timeline now, because I know a lot of folks have been asking questions about the timeline. In terms of what has happened so far, again, many of you will be familiar with this, but the existing hotel closed at the end of May. The site was immediately secured by the construction team led by Moss, and there was a perimeter fence that was erected to secure the site, I think by early July. We then had, at the end of June, the interior non-structural demolition permit was issued. And then up till the end of June, the contents of the hotel were liquidated. We are now in a process of internal gutting, and that's a non-structural demolition permit for the exterior work was issued at the start of August. The pool deck has been demolished and FP&L has come in and disconnected the power. And we have now finalized, I think since early September, the fire access road around the perimeter, which the fire department has been inspected and approved. So that's what's happened so far up to the end of September. And again, some questions from folks recently questioning whether we have building permits for this work. I can assure you that of course we do, and the folks on the call at the city would not allow us to proceed with the work unless we had the necessary permits in hand. And here you can see a couple of visuals there. And now on to the construction timeline looking forward. So again, so high level, we are going to be continuing the gutting of the building, which really removes all of the internal partitions, the hazardous materials, if any, to get ready for the start of next year, where the building will just essentially be a concrete shell, just concrete and steel, to get it ready for demolition, which we expect to be one day within the second quarter of next year. And we'll go more into talking about that later. But as soon as that demolition has occurred, there'll be around 3 to 4 months of debris removal following that. And then we're straight into the construction of the main project from the second half of next year, all the way through to around 2030, when the completed residences will be handed over to buyers and the project will be complete. Now, on to demolition, which is the main focus of this presentation. So just before we get into the detail, I think important to share the context with everyone, because the existing hotel is quite a unique type of structure, and it features reinforced concrete with post-tension cables. And what that means is that within the concrete, there are steel cables that have unbonded tendons, meaning that those cables can actually move within their protective sheathing. And those cables hold quite a lot of tension. I mean, some areas over 100,000 pounds worth of tension, which is a very important consideration when deciding what is the most appropriate method of demolition. And for a conventional demolition, which cuts the building down from the top, where you have those post-tension cables, it can be quite a risky and unpredictable approach to cut those cables, because you need to detension them first. And releasing tension in one area can then release tension unpredictably in other areas. So that was a top of mind when we were deciding on what was the most appropriate method. Of course, the building is near to other buildings, neighboring buildings, both the office and St. Louis and Isola residential towers, and of course, right next to the bay. So we're very acutely aware that we need to do everything we can to prevent any material falling into the bay. Now, when we were analyzing and researching the most appropriate method, it's really between two. It's between that conventional method of cutting the building down from the top, or implosion, which we have ultimately selected and which we're going to talk more about in a sec. But really, this has been a very lengthy process. Swire in collaboration, not just with those experts that I mentioned earlier, but also with the city of Miami, who have been very helpful and rigorous in their questioning of our methods and supporting us on that research. And it really boils down to three key principles that were top of mind for us. First of all, the safety for workers and the community, and ensuring that the method of demolition didn't unnecessarily endanger anyone in the vicinity. Secondly, minimizing disruption to the island, whether that's noise or the creation of dust or any other inconveniences. And thirdly, timing, impact on the project delivery schedule. So of course, the shorter the overall timeline, the more condensed that disruption is, and the less overall impact to the community. So I've mentioned implosion, and I would say that when I first started this process of research, I was very skeptical about implosion. It's a scary word, but since I've had the benefit of speaking at length with our experts, I've learned a lot more about it. And I think it's really important to just understand exactly what implosion is. So if you don't mind, I will just read this definition verbatim, and then I'm going to hand you over to the experts who can tell you a lot more detail and clarity. So an implosion process isolates the key supporting elements of the structure, eliminating them sequentially with small explosive charges so that the building collapses within the structure's footprint. And I think a key point there is that those post-tension cables that I mentioned earlier, rather than being cut and creating a risk of flailing tendons to neighboring buildings, they're going to actually be used in the implosion method to pull the building down in on itself. And yes, implosion creates dust and debris, and we will be installing measures to mitigate those, but it is just one moment in time. It is one moment in time that will be cleaned up within 3 to 4 hours immediately after the blast, rather than a conventional method which would see, jackhammering and consistent noise for anywhere between 12 to 18 to 24 months. So going back to the three principles of safety, disruption, and impact to the overall schedule, and condensing that disruption, we firmly believe that implosion is the most appropriate method for this location, for this building. But I think to really give you more comfort and reassurance on that point, I'm going to hand over to Marc Loiseau just to talk about these three pillars of safety, disruption, and schedule. Marc, can I invite you to supplement them?
So all of the energy used to raise construction materials into place during the construction of this building is stored as what we call potential energy above grade. That potential energy is waiting to be used. We talk about implosion or the use of explosives, energetic felling, we like to call it. We use a very, very small quantity of explosives to release that potential energy using the structure itself, as Henry mentioned, the post-tensioning tendons that create so many problems for conventional demolition, actually assist in our control of the building during energetic felling of the structure, allowing us to control the velocity of fall, how much debris arrives at ground level at each given moment during the implosion sequence. It lets us curl the building away from the water in the bulkhead toward the land side to bring the structure down to pile up the debris at a lower elevation where it can be dealt with by BG Group with their large equipment and capabilities in that regard. The noise levels that are generated by implosion are very low. You have thunderstorms here in Florida. The noise levels at adjacent condominiums is going to be lower than you would normally experience with a thunderstorm overhead. The vibration from bringing down a structure like this has been reviewed by independent engineering firms that work with implosion contractors. They studied the soil configuration, the borings underneath Brickell Key, the adjacent properties, the code to which they were built with, and the vibration that was described by that structural engineer. He said that in an adjacent property like St. Louis, for example, the vibration will be similar to the condominium owner walking across their living room floor and closing the front door. It's going to be that low. So the consequences and byproducts of explosive demolition are very short, very low, well within all of the allowable limits and regulatory requirements. And we've been doing it, as I said, since the 1960s here in South Florida without incident. We agree with Swire and Moss that this is certainly the one approach that would have the minimum impact on the community. It'll be fast, it'll be cleaned up quickly, and they can move on with their debris removal and construction.
Thank you, Marc. Ivy, anything you want to supplement there, or is that pretty comprehensive?
I think that's comprehensive, and we'll talk a little bit more about what you can expect and what you might see on the next slide or two, so I can wait for those.
Sure. Okay. So just talking about the timeline in more sort of micro detail with regards to engaging the community, keeping the community updated. I've just overlaid here. You can see the overall timeline in blue, which I ran through earlier, but specifically in green. Since earlier this year, I mentioned we've had now 12 community meetings, including this one. We've been building by building to update each association on the island, and I hope any folks who missed that were able to catch it tonight. As well as that, we've been including weekly updates about the progress of the demolition and the site management in the Brickell Key newsletter. Starting in the next month or two, actually, we will be now going building by building, or certainly buildings within the nearest vicinity, to do property condition assessments. And Ivy can talk a little bit about that. And then early next year, having more customized conversations with each association about specific protective measures for their buildings, whether that's for their swimming pool or their HVAC units, or features of their buildings that are specific to them. And then as we approach the second quarter, we will, or the weeks leading up to the day of the demolition, there'll be a very detailed run of show and residents will be informed at least 90 days in advance of the date, the specific day of demolition. And then there'll be pre and post implosion surveys done the week before and the week after the implosion to check the condition of all neighboring structures. I think for this is really our last slide, or one of our last slides. This is a specific timeline of what is typically happens on the day of the demolition. And I think Ivy and BG Group are the ones with the practical responsibility to manage this. So I'll hand over to Ivy just to walk us through this.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to step back for a moment and just repeat a little bit of what has been mentioned, but it's very important to understand, which is what's going on now. So since the hotel closed and the liquidation completed, asbestos abatement was completed, the upper pool decks were removed, and interior gutting on all of the floors in both the hotel and the parking garage has commenced. And we actually had the opportunity to walk that with some Swire folks last week, and I think it's very apparent, and you all probably see the activity, that you're starting to be able to see fully concrete shell-like floors on what used to be hotel room floors. So the interior gutting will leave this concrete shell. The next thing that will happen, and it won't happen until the permit is issued for this and hurricane season is behind us, so we're hoping it will be on or about December 1st, is you will see some modifications to the structure of the building that will take elements that have heretofore looked like walls and make them look like columns. So you're basically going to see, and I wanted to talk about what you'll see as residents of the island. You will see something that looks more like a parking garage than you've seen before. Eventually, you will see floors, and we'll get to this in a moment, that have a geotech curtain around them. So it'll look like they're black stripes around the exterior of the floor. Those will be the floors that will have explosives placed on them, because those will be the floors that are shot. And as Mark mentioned earlier, he puts the explosives on certain floors and sets them in a certain sequence such that gravity is allowed to do its job and bring the building down on itself and within the footprint of the building in a sequence that almost looks like a wrap. You will see on those floors, or what we'll be doing on those floors, in addition to cutting columns out of walls, is we'll be wrapping the areas where the explosives will go after. We'll drill them and we'll be wrapping them with chain link fence and geotech fabric a couple levels deep, so that any concrete that's created into pieces will be contained and then further contained in that secondary curtain that I described that you'll see from the outside. Cables will also be placed there to help further control the fall of the building. In the days leading up to the implosion, so that's what's going on now and what will go on starting in December. Leading up to the implosion, the week of, the explosives will probably arrive on site about a week prior to the actual blast date, which again, as Henry said, will be broadcast with at least 90 days notice. And as soon as they arrive on site, they will be monitored by off-duty police 24/7 anytime that CDI's experts are not with them. You'll see pre-blast inspections going on for the implosion team specifically happening at that time. And as Henry mentioned, you'll start to see pre-blast inspections going on of different structures even sooner than that from the development team. You will see vibration monitors installed that will monitor vibration at certain areas and certain distances from the structure that will be imploded. And you'll start to see, again, in the week leading up to the implosion, protections set up in and around your structures, depending on where your structure is, where it faces, and the uniqueness of each individual building. We, the BG group, will be having conversations with your building manager and your maintenance staff about what is appropriate to do for your given structure. And we'll have a meeting with each one of them, just like we had with all the residents before. We'll have a meeting with each one of those teams to go over what is appropriate for those buildings in terms of hurricane shutters, cleanings, HVAC units, parking garages, covering pools, covering fountains, etc. Getting closer to the date of the implosion, you'll see MOT arrive on site. You won't see it set up until the day of the implosion, but you'll start to see that arrive on site. You'll see Connex boxes set up, basically a berm of trailers, if you will, around the site of the building, which helps control the dust as it is generated, and you will see more activity going on around lining the building on the outside. So it's going to start to look a little bit like something that needs to be imploded. The day of the implosion, I'm going to say about an hour before, our certified MOT planner will come on site. They'll bring the MOT that's going to be put in place and will have been approved with permits to set up traffic barricades to control the flow of traffic during the implosion itself. At any time, and this is really important, and I don't know if we mentioned this yet, Mark, but at any time during all of this process morning of, including up until the very second that Mark says it's time to blast, if a life safety or emergency need is evident, we can stop our process at any time and handle that with any access that's needed. So it's very important that you know that all of that is being considered as well. The about 15 to 30 minutes before the MOT will start to go into place. So I would say that if you're a resident of the island and you don't want to be on the island at any point during the implosion, it's probably best to leave the island with, I don't know how long it takes to get off typically, but I would say to leave up maybe an hour before, so that when they start to close the bridge down 30 minutes before, 15 minutes before, you don't have an issue getting off. There'll be an exclusion zone set up, which we will communicate to all of your property managers, and they'll communicate to all of you, telling you that if you're within 800 feet of the building, especially if you're facing the building, you should stay indoors and during the implosion itself. And then there'll be a countdown leading up to when the actual blast will occur. And we've got lots of eyes in the sky and eyes on the ground managing all of this, along with police, to make sure that everything's done properly and that everyone is safe. When we know that that's the case and as close to blast time as safety conditions will permit, and our target blast time will be sometime in the morning because the traffic tends to be less then, we will conduct the implosion. As soon as the implosion occurs, which lasts about 20 seconds, and Mark can talk in more detail about that. As soon as that's done, CDI and its team will go in, assess, make sure that everything that was supposed to happen happened. And they will then tell BG Group it's all clear. We can then go in, start our cleanup, start removing protections that had been in place, start removing MOT that had been in place, start sweeping the streets. We'll have professional street sweepers on site ready to conduct that activity. And from our past experience, within 2 or 3 hours, when you're coming back on the island or when you're opening your windows to look outside, you will see that what used to be a tall Mandarin structure and then looked like something that really needed to come down is going to be reduced to, what would you say, Mark, about a 30-foot tall pile of concrete debris?
Right, right.
And so that will be the big difference when you're driving over the bridge or looking outside. Again, once that is done, we will then collect the vibration monitors. We will conduct post-blast third-party inspections. And as Henry mentioned earlier, the removal of debris should be about 3 to 4 months after the implosion has occurred. That's a lot of information, but that's summed up as best I can do it. And happy to take any questions. Mark, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
No, I don't. I think you covered it really well. The quantity of explosives that we're using is minuscule. It's probably less than 1,000th of 1% of the energy that is going to be dissipated. That's the stored potential energy in the structure that has been there since they lifted those materials above grade. We control the duration of the fall, the velocity of the fall. The structure is going to be coming down starting at the south end. The delay sequence is going to work around the curve up to the north end to the 24-story structure. As we get to the end of the tower structure, we'll begin lowering. We're not going to be talking about imploding the garage structure. We're simply lowering that to make it easier for BG Group to reach that with their equipment. The closest condominium to the structure being imploded would be the St. Louis, which is to the east. And I've already mentioned that the vibration levels that have been calculated there are very, very low. We expect no fly of debris outside of the demolition site. We have reviewed the consequences and byproducts of the implosion with not only Moss and with Swire and BG Group, but also the city agencies, the county agencies, engineer was retained to look into the impact of the implosion, the dust generated on the bay, and they have come up with an answer that it is inconsequential, less of an event than a typical thunderstorm would generate with regard to aquatic and benthic creatures in the bay. So all in all, it's certainly the best way to bring the structure down that would otherwise expose workers to a great deal of risk associated with the detensioning of literally thousands of cables having over 100,000 pounds of tension on them. It's the way to go. It's quick, it's safe, it's proven, and I think it lends itself nicely to this particular structure on Brickell Key.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ivy. So just to wrap up, this presentation was focused on demolition, but just to reassure everyone, going forward as we move towards the main project and construction of the towers, there's some key construction logistics that we will be committing to. So as SWA has always done when constructing on Brickell Key, our intention is that workers will be shuttled in and out of the island during non-peak hours, so not allowed to drive their cars and increase the traffic congestion. That's already underway, and that's how we're managing the demolition. The staging of construction trucks will be done off the island, and the truck traffic on the bridge will be very strictly choreographed and timed. The bridge will be monitored every day by flagmen and the MOS team. And there'll be monthly reports on the condition of the bridge to check that no adverse impact is being caused from the construction traffic. All workers will be properly identified with individual badges and will always remain within the project site. They'll be fed within the project site. They won't be roaming around the island. And in terms of sort of incident response and communication of any emergencies or near misses, our team is in constant communication with the Miami Fire Rescue, as well as having a separate sort of hotline with Brickell Key Master Association so that any issues are quickly addressed. And then, as I mentioned, there'll be this independent engineering firm that'll be monitoring the bridge to really keep a watchful eye on how the condition is affected. So, point is there, we're going to be providing further updates as the project moves along. As I said, today is all about demolition, and that is really our last slide. We do have 3 case studies, which are just projects, demolition projects that CDI and BG have worked on before. So 6701 Collins Avenue, which is the Deauville Hotel, 700 Edgewater, and then 600 Alton Road. These are all waterfront buildings that have been demolished and are just good examples of the type of implosion that CDI and BG have managed in the past. So feel free to ask any questions about those. But as we've gone for half an hour, 40 minutes now, I think it's a good time to move to the Q&A. And I believe we are starting with the questions that have been sent in advance, which I and the team have in front of us. So I will start by going through those sequentially.
Henry?
Yeah.
Just give Alex from the city a time to show a QR code for a second.
Sure. Do you want me to stop sharing the screen?
Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So hi, everybody. I hope I know most of you. I am the Commissioner's Liaison for Brickell Key, among other areas. We sent out a Google form beforehand, and to keep things consistent, I'm going to share my screen now where you can submit your questions in that same Google form by scanning this QR code. And I think we should leave it up on the screen just so that I hope everybody can see it. Can you confirm?
Yes.
Yes. Wonderful. Okay, so to all of the attendees, please scan this code and fill out the form. We have live monitoring of the questions, so we will go through all of them. Thank you, Henry.
Sure. Okay. Well, as I said, I'll start with these questions that were sent in advance. A lot of them are quite similar, but just out of respect for everyone who sent them in, we will address every one. First question is, bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to plug in my laptop. Battery's running low. Give me 1 sec. Okay. First question is, how will the health of the bay and marine life be safeguarded during this demolition and the work? Okay, great question. So I think a couple of points here. Since the building is being stripped of all materials, particularly any hazardous materials, of which very limited amounts have been found, what is left come demolition time is really chill. And as you know, concrete is made up of essentially sand. So the dust that is generated from the demolition is just creating sand that's similar to the sand that's already in the bay. So no hazardous materials will be going into the bay, if any. SWA has also engaged a marine specialist here to look at the impact, if any, on the bay, and they concluded that the implosion and the dust created won't have any detrimental impact on marine life. In an abundance of caution, we're going to conduct pre and post implosion surveys to verify that and remedy any potential effects if there are any. We have been in close collaboration with the county's Department of Environmental Resource Management, the Army Corps of Engineers, and then the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. All of them have been notified about the intention to implode. Second question is traffic material. How will you remove it from the island? The removal of materials, as has always been the way on Brickell Quay, will be done via trucks across the bridge. We have looked extensively into the option of barging, and we will continue to research that. But the feedback that we have got so far is that because barging involves the water and because the bay is protected environmental status, it's impossible to get a permit for barging long term because there already exists an alternative means of transport via the bridge. So we've tried, we'll continue to push, but it seems very unlikely that barging is a viable option. So trucks will be the main method. Third question, would it be better to do the seawall repairs after the demolition and construction of the two buildings? How will the construction and demolition affect the seawall? Well, the demolition and construction of the Mandarin Oriental Hotel won't have any impact on the Brickell Quay Master Association's Shoreline Resiliency Initiative, because as you've heard from Mark Loiseau, the levels of vibrations that are created from implosion are well below the statutory levels allowable and aren't expected to have any adverse impact on the seawall. With regards to the rest of the seawall around the island, the Brickell Quay Master Association deems that as that seawall is past its useful life, it's 52 years old, it's prudent to take the steps to replace it and start that now to avoid the risk of an emergency in the future. That's why they're doing that. Fourth question, when is demolition scheduled for? Well, subject to agreement with the relevant authorities, the implosion is intended for April or May 2026. But as Ivy said, the community will receive at least a 90-day notice to confirm the actual date. Fifth question, I thought the asbestos findings were not going to allow the demolition to take place. Is there still going to be a demolition? This can cause that can cause this to go into the air and affect the residences, especially me that I live right next door in St. Louis. So asbestos was found in very limited areas of the existing hotel behind the mirror mountings, but it has been fully and properly abated by specialized environmental companies who signed a report that's been submitted to the City of Miami that's been signed and sealed and as part of our permit package. In terms of the day of the demolition, as you heard from Ivy, all hazardous materials will have been removed by then. But the advice is that if you're staying on the island, you remain inside your unit and you keep your windows closed just for the time of the implosion. Next question, will the demolition affect the seawall? We've addressed that already. No, it won't, because the vibrations generated from implosion will be well below the statutory allowable levels, and therefore there are no adverse effects expected on the seawall. Can you provide the exact date of the demolition? as it, again, subject to agreement with the city, the implosion is intended for April or May 2026. After the demolition, how many days will it take to remove all the debris, waste, or remains? The debris process, the removal process is intended to last about 4 months, as you saw from our presentation. Next question. To avoid loose, scattered fragments, pieces, or remains, how are you preventing to avoid some of this material to travel towards our buildings or the ocean? Well, there are several measures that are being taken, and because that's really Ivy's area, I think I'll pass to Ivy for that. Ivy, can you just talk about those measures to prevent any fragments from hitting the neighboring buildings?
Certainly. So, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but it's worth repeating. The columns that will have explosives in them will be wrapped with geotech fabric, chain link fence, multiple layers, and then each of those floors will also have a separate geotech curtain placed around it, a secondary level, if you will. So all of that means that when the explosives go off and the concrete fragments, which again is meant to allow gravity to do its job and bring the structure down, the pieces of the debris that are the concrete chunks that are made smaller are contained within those wrappings of the columns. Things don't look to fly out, right? They look to come down. That's what gravity would have, and that is how the sequencing is set up. So the fact that they're wrapped in the geotech and the chain link fence helps contain that risk of the smaller pieces going out when the explosives go off. In addition, cables are put in strategic places along the columns that we will create to help direct the fall of the building when the building collapses in the sequence that Mark intends. And as I also mentioned, you're going to see some Connex boxes, or they look like dumpsters, put around to form a berm, if you will, to help contain anything as it hits ground level. I don't know, Mark, if you have anything you want to add to that, but those would be the things that I would mention.
I think it's important to underscore the Connex boxes, the shipping containers that you're referring to. They're going to be stacked at multiple levels around the site, and the purpose of those containers is to block the air which is rushing out of the building. So if wherever you're sitting, you look around yourself, you're in the middle of a room. That room is primarily air. You have walls around you, but there's air in the room. When we take the structure down, the air in the structure rushes out of the building as it comes down, and the Connex boxes that Ivy is referring to act as a wall to block that air. That air can be of a velocity, could pick up small particulate matter, and by placing those Connex boxes, it further contains any byproducts of the air rushing out of the building. We call that air blast. So between the axe source protection, the wrapping of the geotextile fabric and chain link fence around columns and shear walls where explosives charges are placed, the geotextile curtain around the blast floor itself, and the Connex boxes, we don't expect anything to leave the demolition site beyond dust. And Ivy has already talked about the procedures for cleaning up the dust following the implosion.
Henry, is your team able to take the slide presentation back to slide 19? Because there's a visual there that I think will help people understand.
You're speaking about the bucket of sand?
I'm speaking about the Deauville Hotel slide that shows the Connex boxes stacked and the geotech curtain on the building.
Okay, if you were to go back to that slide, across the street there was a drugstore right across from the Deauville Hotel, and we had BG Group stacked Connex boxes. The very top frame, you can see it to the left. At the bottom frame, you can see 2 Connex boxes stacked up in front of that adjacent structure. To the right, you see the pile of debris. There's no debris in Collins Avenue whatsoever. So the stacked Connex boxes were there simply to block the rush of air that was coming out of the building as it failed. Worked very effectively. There was no damage to any of the adjacent properties to the west, to the condominiums, to the north. Everything went exactly as planned. And the same process is planned to be installed between the tower itself and the structure to the north, and then also to the east of the, I'll call it the garage and the ballroom structure towards St. Louis and Isola. There'll be a Connex box wall there to block the air coming out of the structure.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ivy. Next question. How long will the demolition last? About the residents of the island, we have to stay home or get off the island. So the implosion itself will only last for about 20 seconds and is done into three sequential stages, as I understand it. But the entire process, including the setup and the cleanup immediately after the blast, will probably last the morning. So within 2 to 3 hours, all of the dust that's created, the dust that will be on the neighboring common roads, will be clean and those roads will be operational again. That's right, Ivy, is it?
That is correct.
Now, residents are welcome to leave the island. They're welcome to stay on the island. If they stay on the island, the advice is that they stay in their units with the windows closed, just as a matter of common sense. That's the advice from CDI and BG. But many residents I've spoken to are intending to just be away that day, which obviously makes a lot of sense. But that's how it will be managed. So next question, what type of demolition are you going to do? Implosion, as we have mentioned. Next question, when is the demolition expected to take place? I've answered that. I would appreciate if you put some vibration seismic equipment around key parts of the island to make sure that there are no land movements and to do investigative work should any big seismic move get detected. And such measurements should be received and analyzed by independent engineer firms not affiliated with SWIRE. Yeah, so good question. The vibration monitors, yes, vibration monitors will be installed in key locations, and their measurements will be reviewed by 2 independent firms who will sign and seal their findings. And Ivy, anything further on that?
Nope, it's professional engineers who sign and seal them. So I think that you're going to have 2 independent firms doing it, so that double information.
Right. Okay,
Henry,
thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind unsharing the screen so I can put the QR code back up?
Sure, yeah,
Sorry for the trouble.
no problem. Okay, thanks, Alex. Next question. How is the demolition going to take place and when, if imploded, what is the range that will affect the other buildings around the seawall? Will the condos across the water be affected and how? Well, timing of demolition we've mentioned. It's intended to be for the implosion will be April or May in 2026, and the community will receive at least a 90-day notice in advance. The exclusion zone will be a radius of about 800 feet around the site. And that just means that residents within the exclusion zone should stay inside with their windows closed during the implosion. And then in terms of impact on condos across the water, there should be no impact at all because, as we said, according to the studies that we've done and the review from independent firms, the levels of vibration that will be generated are well below the statutory allowable levels and such that there should be no adverse impact. Next question. This is not so much a question, but more of a statement. It says, not a question, but a heads up regarding what I consider to be an inflammatory email received from a realtor, Annie Santalan from Arwa Realty, regarding this sensitive matter. I'm assuming that this material was distributed to many residents of Brickell Key. This type of marketing threatens our property values and greatly concerns me. Now, I'm sorry, I must confess, we haven't seen this email. But I would just say that I and SWIRE encourage everyone to focus on the facts and avoid spreading any sort of rumor or misinformation so that everyone has consistent information to follow. Next question. Beyond the construction, at the completion of the construction, will an exterior walkway around the island be restored? Well, as we've said, this meeting is all about demolition. But we can say that around the project site, around our construction site, yes, SWIRE Properties will be rebuilding and replacing the seawall and the baywalk so that new baywalk will go around the perimeter of our project site and be connected to the rest of the baywalk. So there'll finally be a full circumference loop around the island. The rest of the bay walk and the seawall outside of SWI's project is the responsibility of the Brickell Key Master Association and part of their shoreline resiliency initiative. Next question, can you share a copy of the permit from the city to implode the hotel? Well, the permit for the final implosion has not yet been issued. That's still pending. As of today, we have received the permit for approval for the non-structural demolition work, and that's the work that's in progress. That's the internal gutting. But yes, once we receive all subsequent permits that we receive, we can make available. They're publicly available anyway. Next question, why are you insisting on doing an implosion? There is no evidence of an implosion in man-made island. Swire seems to be interested more in their own needs and profits than for caring the community. Well, as we mentioned in the presentation, we've tried to explain why we feel that, and we strongly believe, following the advice of our experts, that implosion is the most appropriate method because it's the safest versus the existing or versus conventional method. It creates the least disruption to the island, and it also is the most expeditious, which means that the timeline will be condensed and therefore the overall disruption will be minimized. Next question. When will the Baywalk reopen to the public? I mean, this question is really for the BKMA, for the Brickell Key Master Association. It's not Swire's decision to open or close the Baywalk. Next question, when will the demolition occur and how long will the debris removal take? I think we've answered when the demolition will occur. The debris removal immediately after the demolition will take about 3 to 4 months. But the cleanup of those roads and all of the surrounding area, that will be done immediately. So within the immediate 2 to 3 hours following the blast. Why is it being demolished? Well, the hotel's being demolished to make way for the construction of the new project, the residences at Mandarin Oriental Miami. Next question, what is the timeline of Brickell Key pedestrian access and sidewalk reopening? Again, that's a question that's better suited for the Brickell Key Master Association. Next question, when are you going to start preparing the other buildings on the island to protect their HVAC systems and pools, etc., from the dust of implosion? You stated in the meetings that you were going to meet each condo building to individually discuss the preparation. Well, those meetings about customized protection methods will start in January, and maybe Ivy, you want to just share a little bit more about what happens in those meetings?
Yes, in those meetings, which we intend to start in January, and that's what we've stated all along, we will meet with each of your property managers and maintenance chiefs to go over the concerns for your particular or their particular buildings, the location of their particular buildings, the where their buildings face relative to the Mandarin site. We'll go over the types of protections that we would recommend given the factors that we just described. We'll understand whether those buildings have hurricane shutters. We'll understand what the cleaning schedules are routinely so we can help fit into those. We'll understand parking garages and where there are openings, pools, HVAC systems and the like. We will offer to assist or perform the protections as appropriate for each of those structures, and we'll do that in conjunction with each building it individually, because each building is unique relative to how far away it sits, how it's constructed, and what its particular configuration is. So that's why it's really important that those meetings be custom for each of the structures.
Thanks, Ivy. Next question. I'll be in transit from Europe on the 15th, arriving after the meeting. Could you kindly provide a summary of key points for those owners who cannot attend? Well, our understanding is that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the city's website. So it will be available for anyone who has missed this live presentation tonight. Next question, who is liable for any damages to our building units caused by the demolition? Well, for all the reasons that we've gone through so far, we strongly believe, and again, the advice of the experts is that the vibrations generated from the implosions will not have any adverse impact to neighboring buildings. But in the unlikely event of any damages, we, Swire, and the contractors and subcontractors have sufficient and very extensive insurance coverage to cover the cost of any damages. Next question: why the seawall repairs needed to be announced at the same time? Is this coincidental? Well, we're talking about the demolition of the hotel. We are obviously aware of the Brickell Key Master Association's intention to kick off the seawall resiliency project. That is because the seawall is 52 years old, it's past its useful life, and it's a prudent approach that Swire supports to start taking the steps to repair that to avoid the risk of the seawall failing in the future. But essentially, there is no connection between the two. The obligation that the BKMA has to the city to ensure that the seawall is protected against the 100-year flood, that obligation exists irrespective of Swire's project on the end of the island. Next question: what are the benefits to the island residents from the new Mandarin? Well, we believe that there are several benefits. Of course, there is undoubtedly some short-term inconvenience, and we're not deaf to that. And as I hope you have seen from this presentation and others, we really are trying to do everything within our power to minimize that disruption. But I would say the long-term benefits would be that after the project is delivered and the residences at Mandarin Oriental is completed, it will then be the largest contributor to the Brickell Key Master Association's budget. So that helps reduce the contributions from all of the other associations quite significantly. The new Mandarin Hotel will, as I mentioned, be a third of the size of the existing one. So the traffic generated from it should be much less. The buyer profile of the residences so far that we're seeing are that buyers are typically buying as sort of second or third homes. So again, another reason why we think that the perception of this increased traffic is not necessarily going to be the reality. The new hotel will be Mandarin's flagship property in North America, which I think is just great to add to the profile of Brickell Key, but also there will be very impressive signature spa and multiple fine dining options and amenities on the island. And as I mentioned, we will be intending to make those available for the residents via some sort of specialized tier of membership. And Swire is, as it always has been, very aware of the need to contribute to supporting the infrastructure of the island. So we are supporting the funding of the bridge works, particularly the long-term rehabilitation that will be done after the construction project is completed. And then look, finally, I think it's fair to assume that given the sales prices that the Mandarin project is achieving already, that all real estate values on the island should increase as a result of the project. So that's obviously in everyone's interest. Next question: how is the long rebuild going to affect the values on the island? Well, that's a good segue into what I just mentioned. I mean, ultra luxury developments like our project tend to have a positive impact on the surrounding properties. So we would expect that those property values would increase. I think that's fair to assume. Next question: what dust mitigation measures are being taken and how long will demolition last? So demolition, we've said, will be about 20 seconds, but the cleanup immediately post-demolition will be about 2 to 3 hours. I think in terms of dust mitigation measures specifically, Ivy, I'm going to bring you in and pass on to you for that one.
Yes. So the one thing that we haven't really spoken about, we've spoken about the way we're controlling the dust with the geotech and the chain link and the Connex berms, but we haven't talked about water. And the BG group does all of our projects as wet demolition, and we use a lot of water. We have things that we call dust cannons that spray water up high. We have water on the ends of all of our high reach machines to provide water so that the site is always kept wet and the material on it is kept wet, and wet concrete doesn't generate dust while it's wet. So that is something that we do to try to minimize the dust. We'll make sure the building's as wet down as possible at all times to help prevent that problem.
Thank you, Ivy. Next question. What is the start and finish time in the day? There's work starting at 6:15 a.m., which is excessively early. Well, for the demolition, I believe our work starts from 6. Sorry, for the demolition, we're currently working from 8 till 6, but that we have a memorandum of understanding with the city that will allow work for the main project to be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Saturday, not including holidays. But no work will be done outside of those hours unless it is specifically approved. And again, just because those hours are in place, that doesn't necessarily mention that work will start on the dot of 6 a.m. It may be that workers are bussed on, but those are the hours that we've agreed with the city so far. Next question. What measures will be taken to clean dust setting on buildings on the island from implosion or demolition? Well, as mentioned before, the BG team will be meeting with each of the neighboring buildings to create a customized plan to protect the key elements like the HVAC systems, the pools, and those will be starting in January. So it's going to be slightly different for every building, but the measures will be comprehensive. And Swire and the Swire team will be responsible for cleaning up that dust immediately after the blast. Next question, what is the demolition date? We live in nearby St. Louis building. Any issues we should be aware of? Again, the demolition is intended to be for April or May next year. The community will receive a 90-day notice in advance to specify the date. The exclusion zone will be a radius of 800 feet, which just means that any residents in buildings within that 800 feet radius should stay inside and shut their windows for the time of the implosion or just leave the island. But to reassure everyone, I would just reiterate again that the vibrations created from the implosion will be well below the statutory allowable levels and therefore should not create any adverse impact to the neighboring buildings. Next question, how will the demo affect the ingress and egress on the island? Ivy, I think I'm going to bring you in for that because it's very important to us that sufficient pathways and vehicular ways are left open and maintained for emergency vehicles. And I know that we will have emergency vehicles stationed on the island for the day of demolition in case of any emergencies. But can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. So again, as mentioned earlier, you're going to start to see MOT devices the week leading up to the implosion itself arrive, but you're not going to see them put into place until probably 30 minutes before the actual implosion is set to occur. That's why if somebody wants to leave the island, we would recommend probably leaving an hour before the targeted implosion time, which again will be advertised at least 90 days in advance. Once the MOT is set in place and any time up until the actual hitting of the blast button that somebody needs something, Mark Loazzo can stop that implosion at a moment's notice and we can open up whatever MOT we need to allow any emergency vehicles access to any area on the island and any to be able to get off. But I would think that for the regular occurrences and residents on the island, you should assume that getting on and off the island is going to become a lot harder. 30 minutes 30 minutes before the actual implosion target time, and until about maybe 2 hours after. And at that point, the roads will all be professionally swept and cleaned by the street cleaners that we have on site, and everything will be open and available as it normally is.
Great, thank you, Ivy. Next question. Why are the new unit owners of the Mandarin not funding a large portion of the seawall? Well, the new owners of the Mandarin won't take delivery of their units until 2030. And as the Brickell Key Master Association has made clear, The seawall resiliency project is kicking off now because the seawall is 52 years old. It's past its natural life, and the BKMA, in a covenant that runs with the land that was signed with the city in 2006, has an obligation to repair and maintain it against a 100-year flood. And as a matter of prudency, it's, I think, the right approach to take steps now to avoid any risk of failure of the seawall in the future. So the funding of that of the seawall project is per the master declaration and the bylaws that all unit owners have access to. So there's nothing unusual going on there. Next question. Will the demolition contractor be providing a performance and payment bond? Are the other BK condos listed as additional insureds on the demo contracts policies in the event their demo causes damage? I think, can I ask Kevin to comment on this one? Or Kevin or Mark Cummings from our construction team?
Yeah, sure. So the question here is specifically about a payments and performance bond, and yes, there is one on place that ensures the completion of the demolition. To the extent there are impacts on adjacent properties, which maybe this question was alluding to, there are numerous other insurance policies in place, including general liability and excess liability insurance at various levels of subcontracting and contracting. And then I'll add, just in addition to this, there is an owner's interest policy on top of all these policies. Swire's obviously been in consultation with many insurance providers and vendors to make sure we have everything fully insured, both on site and for adjacent properties.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Next question. How are the residents going to be affected by noise hours of demolition? Is there going to be work on weekends? So as I mentioned, our MOU with the City of Miami allows for work to start at 6 a.m. and finish at 8 p.m. Monday to Saturday, not including holidays. But we're currently working from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday. So we're not utilizing the full hours yet for the demolition, but no work will be done outside of those hours in the MOU with the city. How is this going to affect traffic? Well, during the demolition, we don't expect there to be any material impact on traffic, because what generated a lot of the activity in the traffic was the hotel when it was operational, 360 rooms. That created a lot of traffic. Now that's gone, and as a resident on the island, I've noticed there's a lot less traffic since the site became a construction site. So far, we're seeing that decrease in overall traffic. And as I mentioned, in terms of logistics, once the construction trucks start coming, they will be strictly choreographed in terms of when they're allowed on the bridge, and there will only be one truck on the bridge at any one time. Next question. How long is the demolition and construction going to last? The demolition itself, from start to finish, in terms of the preparation work and then the cleanup, is about 12 months, but the actual implosion blast will be about 20 seconds. And then construction is expected to be completed by 2030. Next question. What is the schedule of the demolition start to finish? Well, I think we covered that in the presentation, but just to recap, we essentially have been spending the last few months decommissioning the hotel. It's now in a period of internal gutting, which will end around the start of next year. And then the implosion will be around April, May, with 4 months of debris cleanup immediately after that. What kind of air monitoring will be performed during and post demolition, and what kind, please? Will there be someone to contact should we find an increase in harmful practices? Ivy, this is quite technical, so I think I'll ask you to answer this one.
Yes, so we will be, and we've talked about this with Durham as well, hiring an independent air quality monitoring company to gather ambient background samples and analyze particulate matter before, during, and after the implosion. So we'll have those baselines, and then we'll gauge it during and after. But it's very important for everyone to be aware that all of the hazardous materials have already been abated from the building. And what you will be left with by the time that the implosion occurs is this concrete shell that we've repeatedly referred to. And the dust that forms the dust that's generated is essentially made of sand, which is what's in the bay to begin with. I think we also should keep in mind that dust is not only a byproduct of the implosion method of demolition, it's a byproduct of any demolition. So the materials that need to leave the site to leave a clean site for the new build are the same materials regardless of the methodology that we use, whether it's conventional or implosion. And I think everyone just needs to be aware of that as well.
Thank you, Ivy. What day will the demolition be? I think we've answered that already. So it'll be a day in April or May next year, but the community will receive at least 90 days notice in advance. Next question. How do you plan to compensate the neighbors for the inconvenience caused by your project? More dust, noise on Saturdays starting at 7 a.m., closure of the island, decrease in the value of our properties, and now the bridge repairs. Well, I would say that the selection of implosion as the method versus conventional demolition is a benefit because it truncates the overall timeline for that demolition. And as I mentioned, implosion is just one moment in time rather than consistent noise and dust via a conventional method for anywhere between 12 and 24 months. But look, overall, there's no specific compensation. Swire is doing something that has always been within its right to do. It has always owned that piece of land on the end of the island. What I can give you is my commitment and my company's commitment that we will do everything in our power to minimize the disruption and inconvenience on the island. Once the project is completed, I see, and I think many would agree that there are many benefits in that the project becomes the largest contributor to the BKMA budget, which significantly reduces the contributions from the other associations. We believe that it's fair to assume that it will enhance everyone's real estate values because of the sales prices that it's being commanded, that are being achieved at the moment. And the public realm, so there's the seawall, the baywalk, the area around the project will be significantly enhanced, which will be a benefit to residents on the islands. Next question. How will SWIRE, the City of Miami, and BKMA manage traffic flow in the height of demo construction activity? I don't think this has been realistically addressed. Who will we contact when things go sideways? The question about contact is a good one. Actually, it was mentioned previously. So at the end of our presentation, there is an email address, which is contact@swireprops.com, and a phone number, which any resident or anyone can use for inquiries to SWIRE or to raise any questions that you have. In terms of managing the traffic flow, as I mentioned, the flow of construction vehicles will be very carefully choreographed. Trucks will be staged off the island. We have a maintenance of traffic plan in place as part of the MOU with the city to help separate construction traffic from residents' vehicles, which is a matter of safety. But I think, Kevin, as SVP of Development, anything you'd like to add on that, or Mark Cummings from Moss?
On traffic specifically?
Yeah, on traffic management, other than staging trucks off the island.
We'll employ delivery schedules where they're timed out so that there's not more traffic at any one particular time. We'll have lots of presence in the street so that we're not holding traffic up. We'll employ police officers off duty to help manage it. And those, we've been successful in the neighborhood over the years employing those tactics.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. Next question. The demolition and subsequent construction process has significant consequences and causes great inconvenience to residents who choose to live on this once peaceful island. How will this company compensate residents for the inconvenience that will last for a long time? I believe it should contribute financially to alleviate these consequences. Well, a very similar question to the one I just answered. So the short answer is no specific monetary compensation because SWIRE is not doing anything that is not within its right to build on the land that it owns. but we are sensitive to the inconvenience caused. And like I said, we'll do everything in our power to minimize that inconvenience. But just a reminder that once the project is complete, it will become the largest contributor on the island in terms of the fees that are paid to the Brickell Key Master Association. Next question, could you indicate what steps you will implement to protect the adjacent properties from dust generated from the demolition and whether you will have scheduled cleanings in the general area of those properties? I think we've already talked about the customized protection measures that are going to be discussed individually with buildings that are in the exclusion zone starting from January. But in terms of the cleanup specifically, I think worth sharing a bit more on that, Ivy. So practically speaking, what happens immediately after that 20-second implosion blast? Roughly how many cleaners are there helping to sweep the streets and remove all of that dust?
Okay, so immediately after the blast, once CDI has cleared the area and given the okay for BG Group to do what we need to do cleanup, we will have several things going on. We'll have one set of crews working with the adjacent properties to remove protections that we've set up on areas that we've covered. We will have other crews making sure that the streets have been reopened properly and the streets are being swept where they need to be swept. But we will also have commercial street sweepers on site with their trucks cleaning up the streets so that that part is taken care of from a totally separate entity with the proper equipment to do so efficiently. And those would be the main things that I would say you'll see, but the net result will be that within a couple of hours, life is back to normal on the island.
Thank you, Ivy. Next question. Will Brickell Key 2 have seismographs and seismometers, as well as high pressure microphones, brackets blast monitors, installed? What happens if in 6 months' time our property notices foundation, wall cracks, etc.? How long will this security process last? 6 months or 1 year? Ivy, I flip to you again on that.
Yeah, so again, the vibrations that should be generated from the implosion are below statutory levels, so there should be no adverse effects on the neighboring buildings, period. That said, these vibration monitors that we will pick up immediately post blast will tell us if something happened. The BG Group and CDI will have vibration monitors to monitor the implosion and its activity. I believe the construction crew, and I can let Mark speak to this for a little bit, will also have monitors on site measuring vibration over longer periods of time. And Mark, in fact, let me turn over to Mark Loazzo first, just to talk about past experience in terms of do cracks appear over time, or is this something that you would be able to see based on the seismic monitors in place during the implosion?
So the pre-demolition surveys that are conducted by an independent third-party company look at existing conditions. Typically, they're cosmetic conditions, a small crack, a flake, a chip in a window, something like that. The vibration monitoring that is installed around the site is tuned to levels of vibration that are much lower than those that might possibly cause damage to adjacent improvements. My family has been taking down structures with explosives for 70 years. We have never, ever had even a claim for damage due to vibration as a result of taking down a structure. We've taken down structures over 400 feet tall, appreciably taller than this structure. We've never even had a claim, much less an actual occurrence of vibration damage.
And now it might be appropriate just to complete the picture. Mark Cummings, I know, is there. I don't know, Mark, if you're able to talk about the vibration monitors or someone from Swire that will be in place to monitor the activity during the construction itself.
Sure, we will piggyback off of the in-place surveys that have already been taken. We will piggyback off of the vibration pre and post implosion, and we will continue to monitor vibration and be looking for any damage caused by construction for the life of the project, and then past the project's opening, we would do a post closeout survey of all the properties and essentially complete the circle.
So we'll have information in terms of pre and post existing conditions and vibration monitoring. I think it's going to start sometime in 2025, and it will run all the way through to completion of the construction project with double concentration during the week of the implosion.
It's accurate.
Okay, I believe that is all of the questions that we received in advance. We're now going to move on to questions that have been received during this presentation that were submitted via the Google Docs. Is that right, Andres?
Yes,
Okay, do you mind reading those out, please?
yes, of course. So the first, after the implosion, how long will the demolition continue by hand for the foundation and also the parking garage, as I have health issues and will plan to stay away for those days?
Ivy, can you help with that
Yes.
one? I think, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so that's a good question, because remember, the implosion brings the structure down to ground level, then we remove the debris that is on top of the foundations, and then we go to the foundations. I would say that all of that activity should be completed. We'll remove the debris while we do the foundations. We're targeting 4 months for that activity.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ivy.
Abby. The second question is, please make sure the call is recorded, also publish to all owners the Q&A responses. So as we mentioned before, the call is being recorded, and our understanding, the city can confirm this, is that this video will be posted on the city's website. The third question is about if this is a sponsored City of Miami meeting, as they see the official logo. I will leave that for maybe Alex to respond, but I believe that it's not necessarily sponsored, but hosted by the City of Miami.
The answer is just hosted by the City of Miami as a courtesy to make sure that this meeting indeed takes place. But it is not a city-sponsored meeting. We're just a facilitator to make sure that it does take place.
Thank you so much, Ace. The fourth question, will Swire pay to clean balconies and windows after the demolition?
So, Ivy, my understanding is that for any damage or dirt created, Swire will be cleaning that up as part of the scope of services that it's paying BG for.
Yes, but again, it's very important to note that we will be working with each building individually to talk about what's appropriate for their particular building, given where they face, what they are, how close they are, et cetera. We will address those individually.
Thank you, Ivy and Henry. The fifth is, are we going to be provided a certificate that clears asbestos and silicas?
The certificate, are you okay with me speaking here, Henry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the post-job submittal for asbestos abatement has already been provided. And so, yes, that is done.
What about silicas? The question mentions silicas too.
So silica gets to the to what's in the concrete. We're not removing silica, we're removing hazardous materials. And we are making sure that everything that is left in the building that will come down is free of anything that's dangerous.
Correct. Correct. There is no silica monitoring or clearance procedure. It is strictly a clearance procedure for removal of hazardous or controlled materials, which has already been completed at the site, as I would say.
Thank you. Sixth question, traffic studies have been referenced, but detail has never been provided. Why not?
I believe that the traffic study that was conducted by Kimberly Horn was submitted and is now part of our application process. Is a matter of public record, right? That was the one that confirmed that the number of trips per hour is within the allowable amount. Kevin, can you remind me of that?
Yeah, that's correct. As part of the permitting process, we have to do a traffic study, and that was conducted by Langen, our traffic consultant. So that was all submitted to the city and Public Works as part of our permitting and approval process.
Great. Then the Washington DC government recently commented that they are intentionally not doing a demo of the RFK football stadium, even though it would be quicker and cheaper because they were very concerned with environmental impact from dust and pollution to the Anacostia River and to the neighborhood. Why those concerns do not apply here? Mark?
So I'm very familiar with that. I'm from Baltimore, and we did quote that project, and a presentation was made to the DC authorities and also the owner of the sports team that is sponsoring that demolition. With regard to the duration of exposure, the greatest concern that they had was there was asbestos in locations in that structure that could not be abated ahead of time. And because that abatement could not be performed, as has been the case here with Mandarin Oriental, they opted to stay away from an implosion approach for a more piecemeal demolition operation that would systematically expose those asbestos-containing materials and see that they were properly remediated in accordance with regulations. So it's a different circumstance. It doesn't apply to this project.
Thanks, Mark. I can see the questions now, so maybe easier if I read them. Next question says, I just wanted to say that I waited to see this presentation and it is 100% disappointing. Residents are interested in the noise and disruption of the demolition, not what this presentation is, which started off as a sales pitch and is not informative at all. Very disappointing. It would be nice if the presentation was informative, which it most certainly was not. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. We really are doing our best, particularly by bringing our experts here and sharing their knowledge with you to try and be as comprehensive and detailed as possible. The first few slides in our presentation were just to provide a bit of context because we recognize that not everyone may be familiar with the project. It's certainly not a sales pitch. And like I said, we will continue to be transparent and engage the community with every step of the construction that comes following the demolition.
Henry, can I mention one thing on that?
Yeah.
I think that it's important to note that, again, there are various means and methods that one can use to bring a building down. You have to put a safety overlay, and Henry talked early on about the 3 pillars that allowed everyone to come to the conclusion that implosion was the safest way to take this building down due to its specific construct being unbonded post-tension. But I think also that even if that wasn't the case, and this building was a candidate, which it's not, for being taken down conventionally, I would like people to know that you probably would have been looking at the impact of noise, hammering, and dust for 6 to 12 months longer than we will be there doing this implosion and cleanup than you would have if it was just the implosion and cleanup. And so I know that implosion is something that people don't see routinely every day. And in Florida, they're not frequent. They're frequent in Mark Loazo's world. They're more frequent in my world than in others' worlds. And even in our world in Florida, I think we've only had 8 to 10 in the past 20 years, of which the BG Group's done 8. But the important thing to note is some buildings are candidates, some aren't. This building would not have been a good candidate for a conventional demolition. But even if it was, the timing of the amount of time it would have taken to do it, the noise and disruption and inconvenience that would have been caused to the neighbors is something that I don't know that people are as sensitive to. And I just want to mention, because not to do so would be remiss.
Henry,
Thank you, Ivy.
let me give you
Go ahead,
another,
Mark.
if you're finished, Ivy.
Yes.
Candlestick Park in San Francisco, a very well-known sports venue. That structure lent itself perfectly to explosive demolition methods. It's adjacent to the San Francisco Bay, aquatic areas that were protected. And the city, the developer, and most of the surrounding neighbors wanted to bring the structure down using implosion because of the reduced duration of impact of noise, dust, etc. There was one community that had political connections and they lobbied against implosion. They succeeded. The city required the demolition contractor to take the structure down conventionally. At the end of the conventional demolition process, that same community demanded to know why the city had not permitted implosion, because it would have been so much faster, less impact on the community, less noise, less dust. So a lot of it has to do with understanding the byproducts of different methods, as Ivy stated. It is the duration of exposure. It's not the nature of the material. It's the same dust either way, but with implosion, you have dust one time, it's cleaned up, and then it's monitored and controlled, as Ivy said, using their dust abatement and water spray techniques. The impact on the community is a fraction with regard to implosion, and there are no other negative consequences whatsoever. It's the right way to take the structure down, and it's far safer for workers.
Thank you, Mark. Where are we? Next question. Why are barges not being used for this massive project to reduce impact on the downtown streets and neighbors? It's a great question. It's one we asked ourselves very early on in this process. Is barging viable? We've done extensive research into it, and the feedback, as I mentioned, is that the relevant authorities who have jurisdiction over barging have said that where there exists a alternative means of transport, like the bridge, they will not issue a permit because the bay is protected or has protected status environmentally. So we will continue to see if there are ways around that, but long-term barging is not viable, which has been the initial feedback. Next question. Will the residents in neighboring buildings need to evacuate the island on demolition day? No, I mean, we encourage residents to leave if that's their preference, but if they prefer to stay, then the advice is just to stay in their apartments with the windows closed if they are in buildings that are within that 800-foot radius. Next question, will residents need to protect cars such as covers or moving off site? That's a good question. And Ivy, maybe I can check that with you. For a lot of the car parking areas are above grade. So would residents need to put their own covers on their own cars, or how are we going to manage that?
So I can only speak if it were me. If it were me, as a common sense person, if I had a cover for my car, I'd put a cover on my car. If I had hurricane shutters, I'd put hurricane shutters down. And some of those common sense things are things that we will mention when we meet with your buildings. In addition to that, because not everyone does have a cover for their car or hurricane shutters or a means by which to bring balcony furniture in if that's what you would like to do, we will be talking about things and ways that we can assist in that regard. And we are very attuned to the fact that there are open air garages. We're attuned to the fact that there are common areas with outdoor furniture and pools. And so we will be talking about all of that. But again, it comes down to common sense. People will want to watch an implosion, but please, if you have hurricane shutters, put them down. People will want to not have to cover a car, but if you have a car cover, why wouldn't you cover a car? So those are things that we would just say common sense should prevail.
Thanks, Ivy. Next question. I think this inconvenience is an outrage. What are you offering residents? Well, like I've said, what I'm offering is mine and my company's commitment that we will do everything in our power to minimize the inconvenience. We are not ignorant to the fact there is going to be some. That is inevitable, but we will do everything we can to mitigate it. Longer term, not so much to residents, but for the health and prosperity of the island, which has always been, SWI's sort of top priority. We're investing in the infrastructure by providing supporting funding of the bridge. We are supportive of the BKMA's decision to close the Baywalk for safety reasons, to minimize the pedestrian traffic in that area during times of construction. And we also support other infrastructure like the Village Green, which we cover the cost of the CapEx works, and then also the playground, which SWI is supporting the funding of the new playground. And we can share more details on that through the BKMA as and when that project kicks off. Next question. Can you speak about what residents can expect in terms of debris removal following the implosion and how that will impact access to and from the island? Also, will the bridge repairs be completed by then, or should we expect any overlap of bridge work and debris removal? Well, first part of that question, I think we've answered. I mean, the debris removal will take about 3 to 4 months post implosion, and that will be done using construction trucks. But the timing and flow of those trucks will be managed so that they don't conflict with peak hours. Second question is more for the city, but it's our understanding and working with the city and having visibility for their schedule that these initial phase 1 bridge works will be complete in advance of the start of debris removal, so there should be no overlap. Next question, will the buildings on the island be inspected for their integrity after the implosion? How soon after the implosion will that happen? Ivy, can you speak to that?
They will be inspected for their integrity after the implosion. That could start as soon as the afternoon of the implosion. And depending on how quickly they can get them done, it may take an extra day or two. But they will be done during the week from the day of the implosion through that week, they'll be complete.
Thank you. Next question, will the residents be able to watch the implosion? Well, as we've said, if you live in a building that is within the exclusion zone and you want to stay at home, then our advice is to stay indoors with your windows shut. But if you want to venture out and you're outside the exclusion zone and you want to watch it from a safe distance, then that is totally your prerogative. Next question, can we please get a copy of today's presentation? Yes, of course, it's going to be posted on the city's website, so it will be available for everyone. So, next question, will the removal of implosion material of the hotel start right away, and will it take 3 to 4 months to complete the removal? Yes and yes. Next question, removal of demolition on bridge structure. That's not really a question, so I don't know how to answer that, but I think we have covered that topic already. So I'll move on to the next one. Can the city address the comment Swire has made about regulations not allowing for barges to be used for debris and construction equipment? Does the city agree with this? Can more detail be given by the regulators who are prohibiting this option and outline what review of any pertinent regulations are underway? Well, as this is a question for the city, Ace, I'm going to ask you to answer that one. Do you agree with the feedback about the research that we have shared that barging is not feasible in this instance?
I don't have an answer for that right now, to be honest with you. That's not under the that would be in collaboration with Miami-Dade County and Durham, right? The jurisdiction, not necessarily under the city's purview to issue such a permit. So I don't think it's in my place to provide that response. I don't have any reasons to doubt that you have already extensively researched that, but we can certainly collaborate that independently and provide that response to this group.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Ace's response, a lot of the agencies and jurisdictions that would make barging prohibitive are at the federal level, because that's where the protections fall, namely with the Army Corps.
Thanks, Ace. Thanks, Kevin. Next question. Why is this whole project even necessary? Well, as I've mentioned, Swire has always owned and retained this land for development. It's the last piece of developable land in what has been a 40-year master plan. Swire bought the island in 1979 and laid out a master plan to create the vibrant community that exists today. And this project is the last piece of that master plan. Next question. How do you anticipate the traffic of trucks and vehicles after implosion during removal and remaining years related to this project compared to what we're seeing now? Will all lanes of the bridge be open by then? When? Good question. I'm going to pass to Mark Cummins of Moss here, because as we know, not every phase of construction is equal. Some will have more intense traffic, others will have less intense traffic. Mark, maybe you can just give a bit of insight into how that plays out over the course of the 4-year period.
Sure. We've planned the building in a way where we're leaving the centerpiece or most of the centerpiece down. And the thought process on that is that we needed a large space in order to get the trucks onto the project quickly so that they're not blocking traffic. We will be bringing them in at a rate that we can handle them on the site. And then we will not be releasing them back out if the bridge is not clear and able to take them. The extended hours kind of help spread everything out. And then, like you said, the beginning of the job during the structure phase will have just a lot of concrete that wants to come every couple of, every 5 to 10 minutes. And we space them on purpose that way so that we can accept them and keep them off of the street. I think that we have spoken with all the powers to be, and that we are going to take one of the lanes during business hours so that we can keep the traffic flowing, one side going to the island for the residents and everything that supports the island, and that the other side would be just a straight into the project so that we don't bottleneck everything. That, like I said before, we'll have traffic controls, we'll have traffic monitors, we'll have off-duty police officers, and we will pivot as needed during peak hours to minimize the impact.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I think Mark had mentioned this earlier, but we will be staging to the extent possible concrete trucks and other delivery trucks off of the island to manage traffic as well as capacity on the island. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned here, and it goes into the construction of the larger project, as Swire has done in the past and as it's doing now, we will be shuttling workers onto site to minimize their arrivals and departures and disruption to traffic as well.
That's right. Thank you, Kevin. Next question. We still looking at 4 months of cleaning, so why not doing it the old-fashioned way, no implosion? Well, the 4 months of debris removal, which I think they're referring to, is contained within the overall 12-month schedule for implosion. Now, that is a lot shorter than a typical conventional demolition approach, which can last anything between 18 to 24 months. And I can tell you from a building that's being demolished very near to where I work, that's been going on for 2 years, the consistent noise of jackhammering and dust that's created from that conventional method, I believe, is far more inconvenient than this one moment in time implosion that then has a 4-month cleanup immediately after. So we believe it's the least disruptive method. Next question. If anything goes bad, what insurance liability do you have and how much? Kevin, I know you've answered this question before. Maybe you can speak to the sort of complexion of our insurance coverage.
Yeah, so as you can appreciate, Swire is a very prudent and risk-averse company, and that ethos trickles down through all of our consultants, contractors, and subcontractors. Just generally, the layers of insurance are copious, and they'll be carried both at the Swire level, the general contractor level, the consultant level, and the subcontractor level. At the subcontractor and contractor level, there will be general liability and excess liability. So we feel like we are fully covered by all aspects of insurance on this implosion project.
That's right. Next question. What time of the morning do you plan to do the implosion? 6 a.m., 10 a.m.? What day of the week are you thinking about, Monday or Saturday? I think that's a great question. Ivy, can I ask you to answer that one?
Yes, we will be working with the city to determine the best date and day and time to do this. But in our experience and in our opinion, it tends to be that a Sunday morning, as early as daylight conditions will safely allow us to do this, so figure about 8 a.m., tends to be something that is the least disruptive, the least traffic, and the best day and time of the week to do an activity like this.
Thank you. And I think you'll need to answer the next one as well, Ivy. Will there be any Coast Guard boats stationed around the island to prevent boats from nearing the south end of the island during the demolition? Or will the implosion not affect any water traffic?
That's a great question, and that there is a large area of the water that's located within the exclusion zone, and we do get together with all of the um, public agencies, so Coast Guard, Marine, Bomb Squad, Police, Fire, ATF, everyone, in advance of any implosion that we do to make sure that everyone is able to manage what they need to manage. And so, yes, in my strong opinion, they will be choosing to have boats in the water to control traffic. That is not, it feels like it's a great viewing area, and that is not a great viewing area. That is something that will be cordoned off as appropriate and consistent with the exclusion zone that Mark will put in place and will be considered part of the permit.
Thank you. Next question, will the Baywalk continue to be private through the construction or after? Well, as you know, the Baywalk is dedicated as a public linear park. It's a public park, so any closure requires the involvement of the city, but Swire strongly support its closure for safety reasons, particularly when the construction project is ongoing. Next question, how can we fight any to whom refuse this implosion since it will take them 4 months to clean? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand that, but I think I would say that the 4 months of cleanup or the debris removal, as I mentioned, within that overall 12-month implosion schedule is shorter than the conventional demolition method, and therefore condenses and truncates the disruption of demolition to the community. Next question. Will Swire or the demolition contractor, CDI or BG Group, provide a written commitment or insurance coverage for potential damages to adjacent properties? In the event of disputes over damage responsibility, has Swire established a claims resolution or mediation process for affected associations? Well, on the insurance part, CDI, well, in the insurance part, Kevin has just answered, but CDI, BG, anything you want to add there, Ivy, Mark? Ivy?
Can you read that one? I want to make sure I understand the question. It's not just insurance related, it's what else?
Will the demolition contractor, CDI or BG Group, provide a written commitment or insurance coverage for potential damages to adjacent properties?
I'm not familiar with that process.
I'm not either, and I would say that I've never been asked that before, because that's part of our duty as a contractor to do, just by virtue of being a contractor that wants to continue to do work and work in the city. So I'm not sure I know how to answer that, but if somebody wants something in writing, we will have to talk about that and see what it is that they're asking for.
Yeah, I think the answer is exactly what Kevin said. As a publicly listed company with a long history, Swire is very conservative and risk averse, and has taken out a considerable amount of insurance at different layers, both general liability, owners controlled insurance program, and then the contractors will also have their own insurance. So if there is any damage, there is what we believe more than ample coverage to address that. And associations are able to make claims against Swire and the contractors if they feel that damage has been caused by them. Next question. You deferred several times to the Brickell Key Master Association, including in response to questions about the Baywalk reopening and the seawall. However, isn't the BKMA board controlled by Swire officers or employees? Well, the BKMA board is made up of representatives from every association. Swire has 3 members on that board. Yes, you're right that Swire officers have a different class of voting rights. That's been the case since the Master Declaration was established in the early 80s. but those SWAT officers have a fiduciary duty to do what's best for the island and protect the interests of the residents. And with regards to the seawall and the management of the Baywalk, that is what they're doing. And I believe with regards to the Baywalk closure, most residents that I have spoken to are very happy that safety is being prioritized and the flow of non-resident pedestrians has been significantly reduced. Next question. Does SWA consider this might be the opportunity to open the discussion either with the city to contribute to the maintenance of the path along the water since it's publicly accessible? I assume that that is referring to the Baywalk. That is a question for the city. I mean, SWA has been supportive of the BKMA's proposal to the city to close the Baywalk because of safety concerns. But ultimately, the Baywalk is designated as a public park, and the responsibility for the maintenance of that sits with the Brickell Key Master Association. Will SWA be cleaning windows for the surrendering building? I think that means surrounding building. Will SWA be cleaning windows for the surrounding buildings during the project? Well, as Ivy's mentioned, there will be customized protective measures and plans in place for each building, and that will include cleanup immediately post blast, which will cover anything that those buildings need that are in the exclusion zone. But that will be discussed and agreed with them as part of these meetings that will happen starting in January. When was the last time a building was imploded in Brickell? I believe there was one quite a few years ago, but I'll have to ask Mark. Mark has the history on that. Mark, do you remember when a building was imploded in Brickell?
Imploded in Brickell.
In Britain?
Brickell.
Oh, on Brickell. Wow.
I can tell you the last time the BG group did a building on Brickell, which is we took down the Sheraton at 495 Brickell to make way for the Icon Brickell, and I have to look up the year of that. But that was probably 2004 or 5. I can look that up. But that building was imploded.
Thank you, Ivy. Maybe you can just look that up whilst we're answering these final remaining questions, just see if it's available. I'd be interested in that. Some people on the call may not know what an MOT is. Can you clarify? Apologies. An MOT
Yes.
is a maintenance of traffic plan. That is part of the memorandum of understanding with the city that outlines how traffic is going to be managed on the bridge for the duration of the construction project. Kevin, do you want to mention anything more about the MOT?
I think Mark had mentioned the MOT. Obviously, there are some limited lane closures around the demolition site currently. We actually reduced the scope of some of those to accommodate some of the city's work and accommodate residents on the island. As Mark had mentioned, in addition to phasing a lot of the deliveries and trucks off-site and off-island during the actual construction of the site, we may be reducing traffic flow on one of the lanes as you approach the site, but that's still under review by us, trying to minimize that as well as accommodate as many trucks on site as possible through those on-site staging areas.
Thank you. Next question. Hi, apologies if this has been addressed already. Any concerns about the collapse of other buildings on the island as an aftershock of the implosion? Thinking Champlain Towers here. Also, what about all the dust and debris? How do we know this is environmentally safe? Thinking about all of the post 9/11 cancer deaths, what is the makeup of construction materials of the Mandarin? These are all very valid concerns, and I've heard Mark Loiseau answer this question very comprehensively before. So, Mark, did you hear that, or do you want me to paraphrase it?
He's reading it.
Yeah, let me read the question.
While Mark's doing that, I will add that the Sheraton Hotel was imploded on November 19th, 2005 by our company. to
Okay,
20.
thank you, Ivy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, the problem with Champlain is, towers, the initial collapse had to do with lack of maintenance in the structure. Those are the studies that I've seen. With regard to the implosion of the structure that we undertook there was vibration monitoring. The vibration from the pellet of the structure, which BG Group and we did, was very, very low. Again, and there was no follow-on litigation claims of any type of subsidence as a result of our fellows of that structure. So there was no problem associated with our bringing down the balance of the structure.
Henry, if I could add something, please. I think it'd be well to recognize that only approximately half of the Champlain towers collapsed. So whatever tremendous vibration happened as a result of that collapse, which is probably similar to what will happen when Mark implodes, the other half of the building remained absolutely intact and had to be demolished by Mark, in fact. So that at zero separation, the collapse of half of the Champlain Tower was not sufficient to collapse the other half. So think about if you're 100 or 200 feet away, it's even less an opportunity for the implosion and the falling of this building to affect other buildings. Champlain Tower, half went down, the other half remained intact at zero separation.
Thank you, Ron. That's a great point. Mark, do you want to add to that?
The other half of the question was related to 9/11 and cancer deaths. First of all, 9/11, that was a collapse precipitated by terrorist activity. Number one, it wasn't an implosion. Number two, I helped write the post-failure clearance plan for the Downtown Development Corp. The city of New York, I was a consultant for them on that project. I'm very familiar with what happened, and I was a consultant there to the New York Fire Department with regard to the safety of their personnel, working in recovery efforts on the piles, I should say, of debris following the collapse of 9/11. The cancer deaths that were followed after that were a function of the smoke, not the dust. The smoke from the continued burning of material for literally months following the collapse of those structures. Those were not related to dust. Those were related to smoke and the smoke containing materials that were inhaled by people working at the site.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, next question. There is another property on there is another property at 1201 Brickell Bay Drive, starting construction soon. Have you coordinated with this developer? Traffic is going to be intense. Have you considered ferry service for island residents? Well, there's three parts to that question. Mark Cummins has spoken already about how we're planning to stage and manage the flow of construction trucks. Yes, we will be coordinating with the developer of that project once there's more clarity on their timeline. And then in terms of ferry service, yeah, ferry service is one of many options we've considered. No conclusion yet, but like I said, with the barging, we are continuing to consider all options. Next question. Swire doesn't own the land, it leases it. Well, that's just factually incorrect. Swire has owned the land since 1979 and is doing everything as of right. Next question. Have you thought about whether it would be advantageous to transport the residues by barge? Yes, we have. I think I've addressed that question already. Next question. There are several studies for the impact of building implosion. I can name a few of them. 1998, Calgary, Canada, and Fardel all over, 2003. This study demonstrates the influence of demolition particles and metal exposures of neighborhoods. These particles remain in the air for several months. How will the residents be protected for that? Mark, this is definitely one for you. I've heard you answer similar questions before. Can you address this one?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Well, first of all, when there's a presence of metals as a result of a demolition project, more often than not, it's a function of what metals are present in the structure being demolished. And typically, any type of heavy metal contamination is a result of torch cutting and of steel that has lead paint on it. Typically, they're talking about lead paint. That aerosolization of the lead paint can be carried out and can be deposited in adjacent community if it's not properly addressed. As has been mentioned several times during this session, there are no heavy metals in this structure. The structure has been entirely stripped. Environmentally controlled materials have been removed. It's down just to concrete and steel rebar. So there are no heavy metals to be distributed as a result of this demolition.
Thank you, Mark. Next question. Have you considered the potential impact on insurance costs for the island properties? And if there is any, who should assume those additional costs? Well, what we have considered and continue to consider is mitigating any impacts to the surrounding buildings. I think we've talked at length about how we plan to do that. For those neighboring buildings that have structural assessments or have their own work schedule in place, we'll be coordinating with them. We'll be checking the condition of the property pre and post implosion. And then in terms of overall insurance costs for the island, I mean, I think the critical infrastructure improvements that are planned over the coming years, and in that I would include the seawall enhancement and the bridge improvement works, all of that should help to lower insurance costs. So I think that's been well addressed. Next question.
Henry?
Do you confirm? Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We are 2 minutes, 2 hours into the call, so I'm going to leave the Q&A QR code for another 2 minutes. So everybody please submit your questions by 8:05 latest, and then I'll take it off the screen.
Thank you, Alex. I can see just 4 or 5 more on the list I have, so let's get through those. Next one. So did you confirm that there is no asbestos in the concrete that was used in the building of the hotel, since it was common to mix asbestos in concrete based on the age of the building? Well, what we confirmed was that there was minimal asbestos found behind the mirror fixings in the hotel. That has been successfully abated and removed and confirmed by independent agency who have signed off on that. And that's part of our sort of permit package. So you can check that with the city. So I don't think there's no further risk of asbestos. The building isn't actually that old. It's only 25 years old. So other hazardous materials are actually not present in the building.
I'll just add to that, Henry, that Durham has walked the building following receipt of the asbestos survey and the completion of abatement.
Thank you, Ivy. That's great. Next question. Can you list the buildings that will fall within the 800 feet radius? Good question. Ivy, can I ask you to confirm that?
Yeah, I have an aerial and it's part of our permit package, and I don't know those buildings all by name as to which ones they are. I'm wondering if I can share my screen, but we can get that to everyone.
St. Louis, Isola, probably Brickell Key 2, and
the office building across the street, the building to the north of that building, and the building immediately. I'm just trying to. The building to the north of the roundabout on the east side.
So, Henry, that would be Isola, St. Louis, Brickell Key 1, Courvoisier Center, both buildings.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just not as familiar with them by name. Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you. Thank you, Andres. Thank you, Anna. Next question. Thank you very much for a comprehensive information meeting. I appreciate your efforts to maintain the BK residents informed. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And then the penultimate question. There's a few more. Hang on a sec. Next question. If the walkway is public, why are the residents paying for the wall? This is so unfair. Well, again, they're two separate things. The bay walk and the seawall are separate things. And the Seawall Resiliency Initiative is part of the Brickell Key Master Association's plan. So again, this presentation is about demolition. So I'm not going to go into the seawall. Next question. Thank you for acknowledging SWA's de facto super voting control of the BKMA. Therefore, it is disappointing when you say things like this is a BKMA issue and you decline to address it. Similarly, when the BKMA Friday newsletter includes a quote from Swire, it comes across as disingenuous. Swire controls the BKMA, therefore I believe it would be more honest not deflect questions about BKMA because you're actually deflecting them from yourself. Until this project is complete, Swire is BKMA and BKMA is Swire. They are one and the same until 2030. Well, there's many issues that are currently being discussed on Brickell Quay. We are trying to focus, just for the purposes of efficiency, on demolition for this presentation. So not deflecting, just trying to stay focused on the topic at hand. Next question. I was there for the Sheraton demolition and the dust traveled all the way over to Brickell Quay and the plume of smoke was quite bad and vibration felt on Brickell Quay. If demolition is so good, why was Banco Santander building not demolished? I assume they mean not imploded, despite much higher costs. Same demolition company doing both. Ivy, I've heard you answer this question before, so can you share why the Banco Santander building was not imploded?
Yes, that was not an unbonded post-tension structure, and therefore, given its construction, it made sense to be able to safely take it down conventionally. Such is not the case for the Mandarin, which is an unbonded post-tension structure, and therefore not safe, in our opinion, to take down conventionally.
Great. Thank you, Ivy. I think that's a really key point, right? It's the specific structural nature of the Mandarin building that exists that lends itself to implosion rather than conventional demolition method. Next question. Beyond the immediate 800-foot radius, you have also considered the potential impact on buildings along Brickell. Have you also considered the potential impact on the buildings along Brickell Bay Drive across the water? Are you currently in communication with those building associations? And how does Swire plan to coordinate or take action if structural, environmental, air quality issues are reported following the implosion? Well, as we have said, we have done extensive studies already that have shown that the vibrations created from the implosion will be well below the statutory levels and not even perceptible in buildings that are outside of the exclusion zone. Mark, I think more compelling if you reiterate that rather than me, because you're the expert, but is that the case?
So it's hard for people to understand what we do. We take down these massive structures in a matter of seconds, and of course there must be vibration. I've used this analogy before and I'm going to use it again because it's a good visual. If I have a metal bucket full of sand, and I hold it above a glass table and I drop it, the metal bucket full of sand is going to break the table, right? But if I take that same bucket of sand and I pour the sand out on the glass table slowly, and then drop the metal bucket on the sand, it doesn't damage the glass table. So what we've done is taken the same type of material, the same quantity of material, we've delivered it to the same place, but by changing the method of delivery, we change the outcome with regard to the safety of the glass table. The same thing happens here. We fracture the structure in midair. That fracturing in midair consumes much of the potential energy that is stored in the structure above grade during its construction. As debris from the lower floors comes to grade, it acts as a cushion to further cushion the fall of material from higher elevations, resulting in levels of vibration that are just amazingly low. And this has been proven in the demolition of literally thousands of structures on similar types of geotechnical conditions, high water tables, such as you have at Brickell Quay. We work adjacent to beaches and on man-made islands all the time. We fell the King Dome, the largest reinforced concrete dome ever built on Earth. We fell that in Seattle on top of man-made fill that had a water table 3 feet below grade. We had historic structures 90 feet away, no damage. So this is a long proven principle. It works, it's safe. There will be no damage to adjacent improvements, short-term or long-term, using this method.
Thank you, Mark. And now the final question is, Is SWI continuing to pay monthly maintenance, or do the rest of the buildings will have their monthly fees increase? The answer is yes. SWI will continue to pay maintenance fees, which are applicable to the site as a construction site. So once the building permit is issued, which we expect to be within the next 6 months, then the site becomes a construction site. And according to the governing docs on Brickell Quay, there is a rate that is applicable for a construction site with regards to the management fees that, or the maintenance fees that the site will pay. So the answer is yes, SWI will continue to pay. I think that's it, unless I've missed any more, Andres.
No, you got it all.
Okay, well, look, I'd just like to say thank you very much to the city. Thank you to everyone who joined tonight. We have done our best to be comprehensive. Like I said, this is the 12th of 12 meetings that we have done now on the topic of demolition to try and share the information, keep everyone updated and engage with the community. Like I said, you have my and SWI commitment that we will do everything in our power to minimize the disruption. And we will continue to keep everyone updated with the next phases of the project as we move forward through and past demolition. But thank you very much for your time.
Henry, can you share that slide that has the email information just in case?
Sure. There we go. So Andres, do you want to just explain about these contact information?
Yeah, anybody from the community that has an inquiry to the developer or a comment that would like to share can do it at contact@swireprops.com. And then we'll try to answer those questions as soon as possible, or you can also call 305-978-0956, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, to ask questions about the development or the project if needed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark, Ivy, Alice, Alex. Anything else you want to add?
No, I will let Ace comment on any closing remarks.
No closing remarks here. But I do want to thank Henry, Ivy, and John for your very thorough presentation. Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to answer just about every question that was posted. Alex, if any additional questions continue to come up and they're geared or centered towards the city, please send them my way, and I'll be more than happy to provide a response as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ace. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Bye.